Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Farmington Board of Education meeting for Monday, March 19th, 2018. If we can stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item on the agenda, 5B, Special Services Review and Update.
So last year we engaged in a K-12 Special Services Review with the DM group. I'm going to hand out, just as a reminder, a PowerPoint from when we did introduce those commendations and recommendations to the board. And I've used that as Kim and Lori go through their presentation. We thought it would be important to present an update to you to see what's been accomplished so far. And Lori Singer, our Director of Special Services, and Kim Wynn, our Assistant Superintendent, will be co-presenting.
Kim, I need to go old school for the PowerPoint, so
You may.
I'm over here.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I gave you the one.
So tonight we're going to just do a brief review of the work that the DM group has been doing in district, and I'm going to, I know Kathy, you were going to maybe give a quick review of our original proposal, and then we can talk about where we are now.
Sure. If you look at the original PowerPoint that we had gone through at the beginning of the year, you could see what some of the commendations were when it comes to special services. Faculty and staff were reflective and focused on how to continuously improve services for students, and that this faculty and staff are really excited that the district had found ways to emphasize a more student-centered approach to learning. And there were many in-house supports for students with severe disabilities, and leaders often involve the community in decision-making, and leaders are striving for continuous improvement. And then it goes through individual commendations, and you can read that on the next two slides. And some of the opportunities they talked about were research-based practices that are relevant to an opportunity, best practices, current practices observed from focus groups and schedule sharing, and then future considerations, potential next steps. Met with various groups. And there were two buckets that they had put their recommendations in. One was to improve scheduling so that students gain more time with content experts. And so that really is looking at our scheduling and trying to schedule with as much efficiency as possible so that we can maximize the time that we have with staff during the day directly servicing students. And the other is clarifying roles of certain practitioners and providing coaching to help them build their skills. And that was another area we've been focused on this year. So those were really some of the next steps that we were given, and we've been working on that since the beginning of the school year.
So this year, one of the things we've been doing is piloting some of the scheduling and coaching ideas that the DM group had, and we're doing it at West District School right now, is piloting some of these things with the idea that we can tease out what works, what we need to do further work on, and then spread it out to other schools. So these are the three areas that we're focusing on. You can see scheduling, coaching, and social, emotional, and behavioral supports. So as far as the scheduling piece goes, again, defining and prioritizing scheduling that supports teaching and learning. Some of the specifics that we're really looking at is how to form a block that we can have interventions in. Oh, thank you. how to have a block of intervention support, so students who either need extra support or enhancement of what they're doing can be meeting at the same time. One of the challenges we've had in the past is that the way the schedulings work, we've had to pull students out sometimes of core areas, and we don't want to do that. We want to make sure all students are getting core instruction, but that they also have another time. So it can be very complicated, especially with some of our larger schools, but the aim of this is to really find an effective scheduling system that students can move in and out of getting what they need, and not interfere with core instruction. I know Kim at Westwoods, this is in place, maybe you could say something about that.
Sure. Well, both at West District and Westwoods, they are piloting. I think at West District they're calling it Power Half Hour, and at Westwoods they're calling it Flex Time. So it's a 30-minute block of time during the instructional day by grade level, where the support specialists, special education teachers, instructional specialists like the math and literacy specialists, the OT, maybe even the PE teacher, when other teachers in the building with specific expertise can sort of come to the team, keep kids with their classroom teacher, keep them on team, and have much more of a supportive, self-directed environment, so that, as Lori said, children are getting what they need from the experts in the area that they need it. Other children are having an opportunity to do challenging work, extension work. At Westwood, students are really working alongside their teachers to set sort of 2 to 3 week goals for themselves, what I want to work on over the next 3 weeks. Because everyone can work toward a goal at whatever level of progress you are. So it's extension, it's challenge, it's support, and it feels very fluid and flexible, and the time is used purposefully, and then it can change. When the student's meeting those particular learning targets, they can immediately move on. It's not as though you are assigned to an intervention for half a year and you're just stuck there. So we're trying to be more responsive to student needs, more immediate, and bring the experts to the children rather than taking children out of core instruction, going to the experts.
And just to add to that is that one of the things that we're really conscious of is when you pull a student out of core instruction to get extra help, then they're losing the flow and the sequence of the core instruction. And then when you try and reinsert them, they may have missed critical areas. So that's what we're trying not to do. We want to keep students with their classes, but yet offer them extra support as they need it. And again, designing a structure and process for effective prevention, intervention, and instruction. We're also looking at, there's the intervention block, but then there's also the rest of the day. How do we structure other supports that students might need that will work around their schedule? And really the big help that we're getting from the DM group is looking globally at scheduling and how we make this work, because there's a lot of moving parts, and certainly is beyond me at times. So, with their software they have and with their expertise, I feel like we're getting a good handle on how to do this. And again, we've been doing a lot of talking this year with the specialists, and I know in special services, we've been talking a lot about how we're maximizing our direct service time, trying to minimize meetings that we don't need all the people at that have been there, streamlining any outside commitment, so the specialists are spending as much time as possible with direct student time rather than at other types of activities. Coaching. So we have had coaching in place for how long now? A long time? Okay, Kim, a long time, but we're always looking to improve, and we're continuing to focus on looking at best practices. In particular, looking at how we can help teachers to better support struggling students in the classroom. And that is a big focus this year at West District, is looking at the research, looking at how we train teachers and how the coaches then can train teachers to best support students that are having difficulty in the classroom. And then the last large category, social, emotional, and behavioral supports. This year, we have continued to do a lot of professional development in these areas, and where's my page? We've been looking at some strategies from a book called Management in the Active Classroom, which I think has been spoken about at the board level before. And it really looks at building culture and climate in the classroom and also developing more Tier 1 interventions for students. We're also spending a lot of time with our mental health staff on developing more scientifically based interventions that not only will show outcome at the end of the length of time they see the students, but also that we can start to see more carryover into the general ed environment that we can then look at. So that's a big area right now that we're concerned with, and making sure that students can seamlessly pass through tiered interventions to get the supports they need for behavioral struggles. The hardest part too is the transfer into the general ed environment, because when you have students who have any kind of an emotional behavioral issue and you're working with them in a contained environment, you can do interventions that you might see effect. But then once they go back out there, it's so important that we really look at ways of monitoring it, and that's another piece that's being looked at West District, is how do we then continue to monitor the students ongoing and make sure that what the interventions are effective, and if we start to see regression, that we can pull the students back and then give them, you know, either further interventions or different interventions to help them. The whole idea being we really want to get ahead of things before we have major problems with anyone. So that's a focus at West District and across the district. And that is it. So, Kim, did you want to add anything else to it, or does that seem like a...
No, I would just, reinforce what you said, Lori, about the full spectrum of social emotional learning across the district. So you've done a lot of work this year at IAR. All principals we meet regularly at an elementary pathways principal group and an upper pathways principal group. And, a focus on social emotional learning has been ongoing. As you say, we want to stay ahead of the issues that are presented to us and try to provide a foundation for teachers so that classroom norms, classroom routines are shifted a bit to reflect our model of active learning. So students aren't just sitting in desks listening to a teacher talk. They're really actively engaged, and that takes a whole different set of behaviors and skills, if you will. And so teachers need to explicitly teach students how to disagree with someone in your group respectfully, and how to express your opinions, and what to do when you feel frustrated, when things don't go your way. So we're finding a need to really teach those things explicitly. And this book in particular, the Management in the Active Classroom, has given teachers some good strategies for that. And so this is an ongoing need and an ongoing focus of professional development at all levels. And I think we're making some great strides this year.
I do as well. And what the DM group has really done for us is we've had lots of ideas, but they help us with the structuring of it. They've helped us look at what best practices are, and then how do we implement this in a systematic way. And that's where they've been incredibly helpful to the district in establishing that, and I feel like we're making really good progress with it. So, questions?
Well, thank you, Lori. Thank you, Kim. I mean, obviously, I think as a board members, we all recognize the importance and the significance of the special services relative to our educational proposition here in district. So I appreciate all your efforts, and it's great for the update. So I'll open up for any questions, comments from the board. Mark.
First off, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is a great report. I appreciate it. I had a quick question regarding the improving scheduling with experts section. Right now, some students with IEPs who attend resource at IAR have to make decisions about which classes they can take in terms of their midday blocks or extras. I've heard from a few people about music versus Spanish versus, things that they want to do to prepare for high school. Now you have students who from third grade are taking strings, they move into band up at Westwoods, they may have 4 or 5 years experience, but then they get to IAR and it's cut off because it's kind of a decision, prepare for a foreign language or take music, and that kind of leaves a big deficit if they want to go into high school because now they haven't had music for a couple of years. Is there anything in this that was addressed with music in terms of, or discussion about ways to improve a situation for a kid who may have to take, who wants to take Spanish to keep up with our world language requirements early on and still be able to have music exposure at the IAR level before going into high school?
So I'm glad you brought that up. It's one of the struggles we have had at the middle school level is the way the scheduling's been set up, that we've had to make choices for students or with students about, fitting in all their core classes and then also getting resource. So we are in the process now of looking at scheduling IAR, and that is one of the main reasons is that we want students to have time to be able to do things that have meaning to them, such as music, but also be able to receive the supports they need. So that is right now where we're piloting it, we're working the kinks out, but that is an ongoing issue, and it is something we're going to be looking at IAR is scheduling and how we can make sure that all students have access to these types of things. For some kids, music might be the most important thing they do. We don't want to take that away from them, and it's very important. So that is the next step. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you.
Kim, just quickly, you referred to goal setting. Can you just shed some more light on that, how that works individually with the curriculum and everything? There's short-term goals, long-term goals, 2 weeks, 4 weeks? I just don't know.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, students meet regularly at the Westwoods level, let's say in 5th and 6th grade, students are with their primary classroom, homeroom classroom teacher all day, or in the case of 6th grade with their 2 teachers. And so as a part of our regular curriculum in all subject areas, students at various intervals, appropriate intervals, come to the end of a unit, let's say, and reflect on their own progress and begin to think about where during our next unit, where do I see my challenges? What do I need to work on to get better? And so as you saw with these young writers here today, it would be similar. It would be, saying, well, I'd like to work on better organized paragraphs. So during flex time now for the next few weeks, I'm going to set that as my goal. And when I find that there are 2 or 3 other students who have a similar goal or even a somewhat parallel goal in writing, the intervention teacher who's available during that time, who comes to the team, can say, you know what, I'm going to work with the 4 of you because you have very similar goals, and we'll just responsively work on what those students have said they'd like to get better at. Some students might have a goal and they don't need an expert sitting next to them to accomplish that goal. They might work with each other. But at regular intervals, students reflect on their progress relative to standards and then set some goals for where they'd like to go next.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Lauren. Very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, 5C.
So each year we do undergo an audit, and that is by state statute of each fiscal year. So tonight, Leslie Zoll from Bloom Shapiro is here to provide some highlights of our 2016-17 fiscal year audit.
I'm going to hand out Leslie's presentation for the board. And recently, it was in February, Leslie, you already have presented to the town council?
Yes, so in February, we did present the audit report to the board, and we did present a similar presentation to the board. I'm trying something different this year. I know that the financial statements can be pretty voluminous. So I thought the PowerPoint would just give you some quick highlights. Obviously, it's not supposed to be used instead of the financial statements, but it will provide you a supplement to those financial statements. And I'm going to be presenting the agenda in this format tonight. So thank you very much for having me. I love to see the kids perform. It's a great experience in public speaking, which I know I didn't have in the 3rd grade, right? So thank you all very much. My agenda tonight is going to kind of walk through what the engagement scope is, what the standards are that we use to create, to do our audit. And then some of the highlights on the financial statements, on the federal single audit, and on the state single audit, just some required auditors communications, and then I did provide some GASB pronouncements that are coming down the pike if you ever want some night reading, you can't sleep, or what have you. So our engagement scope for our audit is based on what we call opinion units. So our opinion units, the buckets, if you will, that we opine on are the governmental activities, which are really a blending of a lot of different things, a lot of different governmental funds. It includes the general fund, includes some of the non-major funds, but it's on a full accrual basis of accounting. We then have the business type activities, which are the enterprise funds, the Westwoods Fund, wastewater, and then some major funds, which are based on a threshold. The general fund is always a major fund, and then the aggregate remaining fund information for the town. We're bound by not only the auditing standards generally accepted in the United States, but because the municipality receives federal and state funding, we also have additional standards, which we call the Yellow Book. Above and beyond some things that we need to look at when we do the audit because of that federal and state assistance. On the federal single audit side, the uniform guidance has come out to give us guidance on what to test in terms of the actual grants that come in from the federal government. And then on the state single audit side, the state has mirrored the federal side here in Connecticut via the State Single Audit Act, and that gives us guidance on what we need to test in terms of programs related to state assistance. I know sometimes there's questions related to, well, who's supposed to be doing what is the auditor's role, what is management's role, so I just kind of wanted to go over that briefly with you guys tonight. Management is basically responsible for the preparation of the financial statements. They're responsible for setting internal controls that make sure the financial statements are free from material misstatement. As an auditor, we come in and just express opinions on those financial statements to make sure that there's just nothing material outside of the norm. We don't look at every transaction. We can't, find every nook and cranny, but we do have standards that we talked about on the previous slide. There's standards that we go by to make sure there's no material misstatements in those financial statements. For the fiscal year ending 6/30/2017, the town did receive an unmodified opinion. Again, it's something that you'd want to receive every year. It's simply a clean opinion, which means they've complied with all the requirements. And the financial statements immaterially in accordance with GAAP. In terms of internal controls and compliance on the financial statement level as a whole, there was no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that were identified in the audit, and there were no instances of compliance. So a pretty clean report. That's what you strive for every year. The next few slides, 6, 7, and 8, are really just a snapshot of the financial statements. Again, the governmental activities and business type activities on slide 6 is really the full accrual basis of accounting. And what I mean when I say that, that means it includes all of your long-term debt, all of your assets. Pretty much all accruals that go in to GAAP financial statements are recorded on these two schedules. And then we've outlined the revenues and expenditures as well. And so the governmental activities net position increased about 14.1 million. Again, that includes a lot of things. It includes capital assets, long-term debt, a lot of long-term receivables and payables that you wouldn't normally see in like a general fund. Operating and other capital revenues increased 13.9 million, and overall tax revenue increased 3.5. On the business type activities, the net position increased 151,000, and that includes both funds, both enterprise funds. Slide 10 is related to the governmental funds. So this is on a modified basis of accrual. It does not include long-term receivables and long-term payables. Fund balance for the general fund at 6/30 was 12.6 million. Total governmental funds was 534. The deficit in the capital projects is really just due to timing of when expenditures are incurred and when bonding happens, because bonding usually doesn't happen until the projects are completed. Fund balance increased about $1.3 million for the fiscal year. Current tax collection rate is still very high at 99.7. Your unassigned fund balance was $12 million, which represents about 12% of fiscal year 2017 budgeted expenditures. And I thought I'd just highlight the Board of Ed budget ended the year with a $9,353 positive variance between what you've expected to spend and what you did spend. On the non-major side, in relation to some Board of Ed activity, the cafeteria fund went up $76,000 from the prior year. Special projects funds, which are your educational grants funds, went up about $36,000. You still have a deficit balance there. Vince and I talked about that. It could be timing, it could not be timing. And then on the agency fund, student activities, cash went up about $37,000, and that just has to do with timing of projects for the kids. You have a cash balance right now of $1 million. Moving on to just kind of highlight the results of the federal single audit. I've mentioned uniform guidance requires us to do some testing on some programs that are federally funded. There's a threshold that needs to be met in order to make sure we comply with uniform guidance. We've tested special education cluster this year. There's no findings to report to you. There's no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in relation to that program that we've tested. So that's good news. On the state side, there's also nothing to report to the town at all in terms of material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. I think this year, the way the funding worked out, there was really no Board of Ed related state single audit programs tested this year, but I did want to just highlight that there was no findings over on the town side for the state single audit. I want to just highlight some things that we tell the board on the town side when we present the report. There are some obvious accounting estimates within the financial statements. For example, OPEB obligations, pension liability. Those are very volatile, and we use disclosures and information from actuaries to present that information. Useful lives of capital assets and allowances, depending on how you estimate that could fluctuate what those balances are. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. But during our audit, we had no difficulties with management. They were very responsive to all of our needs, and we enjoy working with the Board of Education. There were no disagreements, no material misstatements that we needed to note to you tonight. And there was no, disagreements on accounting concepts where we would have to shop different opinions or anything like that. There are some GASB pronouncements that are coming down the pike for next year. The OPEB standard is now going to come into play, and really, just to give you a snapshot of what that means in plain language, if I can, because it's pretty complicated, but it's basically they're moving away from the actuarial tells you what to fund and you fund that amount, and that's the difference between what you should have put in and what you have put in was the liability on the financial statements. We're moving away from that model to the full liability for other post-employment benefits. So if you were to take the entire liability estimate and subtract out any trust fund that you may have to support that funding, would be your net liability, and that's what's now going to go on the balance sheet as at 6/30/2018. The pension funds had that similar standard a few years ago, so it's already been known, and the bonding rating agencies know all about this. The other pronouncements are not terribly significant. They're based on just some very specific transactions. I know the FASB has been very active in trying to change some of their accounting methods with leases and stuff, and that will impact the municipality audits, but not until later. The lease standard's not till 2021, so we have some time to work on that. Do you guys have any questions in particular for me while I'm here?
Yep, Liz?
I'm sorry, I had to leave. I was coughing for no reason at all. I don't know what happened. But, so I just wanted to go back to, slide 11.
Okay.
You talk about how the Board of Education budget had a $9,353 positive variance for the fiscal year that ended in June, on June 30th. So that money then gets turned over to the town and goes into the general fund.
Yes.
Does that happen on July 1st? That's not, I guess my question is, what fiscal year does that happen in, the $9,353?
It would go in at the end of the fiscal year, so it would be July 1. That money would be in fund balance.
Okay, so the fund balance right now for the town is, or at the end of the year, in 2017, the end of the fiscal year, it was 12.6 million?
Yes.
And that's what
That
is commonly known as the rainy day fund in towns, right? Like for people who don't want to call it a fund balance?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I'm gonna say yes to your question.
Well, I didn't say it was right that people call it that, I'm just saying that's what people call it.
Yeah.
So the 9,353 goes in that, and
That's included in that number.
Oh, it is. That was
Yeah.
my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Because everything kind of gets flushed out into that ending number. So to answer your question, it is included in there.
Okay. All right. That I think was my only question. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? So I guess generally, Leslie, the State of the Union is good.
The state of the union is good.
That's good. That's always reassuring for the non-accounting people here in your audience, but that's good. Thank you very much for all your efforts and everything that goes into this. I know it's a big undertaking, so we appreciate it. We appreciate you coming before us and keeping us updated, so thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to thank Vince and his team for all their work. This is a great deal of work throughout the year, but also in preparing for the audit each year.
Thank you, Kathy, and Leslie's team is just as, I saw that comment in there, it's nice working with management, well, it's nice working with her team, it's a very professional team that she sends to Farmington.
Thank you.
So thank you, Leslie.
Okay, next item, 5D, Engage Learning Update.
So I'll highlight a few things. FHS has several highlights for this issue of the Engage Learning Update. FHS was designated as a Project Lead the Way Distinguished School, only one of two in Connecticut this year, so we're very proud of that. Poetry Out Loud, we have a student, the school champion for this, going to the state finals. And there's also, if you take a look, and anyone who really loves history, we will have National History Day on May 2nd. And I know the theme, I believe, is conflict and compromise, but there'll be lots of students showing their work. Noah Wallace is featured with a service project for a rescue dog, and that was attached to an author's visit. Westwoods also had a virtual author's visit, Abby Cooper, and East Farm celebrated Read Across America Day. So those are the highlights from our engaged learning.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, thank you. And 5E, professional appointments, retirements, resignations.
Nothing?
Nothing, so it's okay. Next item on the agenda, 6A, unfinished business, budget, impact budget update. Vince?
I'm going to hand out a summary. And I know that Kathy and Christine and Mark, I think too, were part of
Liz
the,
and Andre.
and Liz, there were a number of people part of the marathon.
I did not undertake the full 8 hours.
There were many hours for people to come and go.
Liz went to a play, I came back.
So I think we can get the play-by-play, but from a lot of people at the table.
Thank you.
However, this document, Kathy had done a update to the DLC right following the that big long meeting on Saturday. And then I went and spoke with Joe Swetke this morning and got the fine print so that we all could all see this and talk through too with Joe, because Joe, especially in the capital area, Joe does have the discretion at times to round some things, as Kathy pointed out, you know, and to get to round numbers here and there, $500 here, $500 there, so you all can see it right now. And I guess the most important thing I'd first mention is that now it is the town council recommended, the stage of the budget is now the town council recommended, and the board's operating budget, there was no cuts made to the board's operating budget. This is a very good thing. And then with capital now is in three areas. There's the capital request, which was taken apart, if you will. You have a capital cash number of $894,000, and the result there is outlined. I won't read through each one of these. I will highlight simply the things that were cut or reduced, because there were items that were completely taken out of the board's recommended, and those items were the cafeteria equipment, $25,000. The FF&E, or classroom furniture, for $150,000. Those two items were cut by the council. And then the technology, the $500,000 request for the technology bucket was reduced by $25,000. So again, the capital cash number carrying is right now is $894,000. Then it was two questions were developed for the referendum, and if you think of them in these two different buckets, that's not exactly how the questions are going to be posed at the referendum. Joe is in consultation now with the town's bonding attorney, and it'll be a more detailed question that will be the board will see. But if you one bucket is school security and infrastructure, that's $1,935,000, and then the second bucket being school roof projects for $1,995,000. Final comment down at the bottom, there were some zeroed out. It was smaller sums of money and three board capital lines that were zeroed out at the table. There was $872 left in the K-8, the Friar Report line, and that's been swept. And the cafeteria equipment still had $96, and then there was a small remainder in the IAR library renovation, which is, as the board knows, completed, of $2,350, and those three lines were swept out of those capital lines. But I would now say to Kathy and Christine and those who were at the all-day meeting, if they like to
Well, first,
say-
Vince, before you do that, I'd like to just, I guess on the record, apologize to Christine for, I was out of state on Saturday. I said, don't worry, you just go. They might ask a couple questions, Kat. It's simple. And I didn't know what she was getting into, so my sincerest apologies. In the past, it was not like that, but just, I'd like to just extend my thanks and gratitude, obviously, to Kathy and Vince during the budget process. It's a significant undertaking, and I'd like to thank my fellow board members, who supported the process both at the capital hearing, the operating hearing. Just as a show of strength and support, it was nice to have everybody there, and show support to the town council that this is a difficult time. There were difficult questions posed to us, and I think the budget was responsive as we presented to them, and there were some changes made. But just to reiterate that, everybody knows that this process is not over. It's going to go to public hearing and referendum. So we have to continue to try and get this budget passed. I mean, we may not be necessarily happy with it as presented, but it is what is going to go forth. And I think, given some of the environment following the high school project, I think it's critically important that we continue to support what we're presenting. Putting aside maybe our opinions on it, but I just want to thank everybody that was there supporting this budget, supporting Kathy and Vince most importantly, because it was difficult, and I just want to thank everybody for that. I'll open it up now if you have questions for Vince or Kathy, or just open up the floor now. Liz?
So the first thing I want to say is that in my, 8 or 9 years of watching the budget process in Farmington and then eventually being a part of the budget process in Farmington, I have never been more proud of the Board of Education of Farmington than I was this year. I think it was exactly what needs to be done, and it was exactly what the Board of Education is all about. And we took stands, we stood together, and I really was so proud to be a member of this Board of Education. So that's the first thing I want to say. The next thing I want to say is that for these bonding questions, it's imperative that the public know, and that we know how to talk to the public about these, that they either pass or fail, and it could be one vote. It's not one of those things that if people don't come out, they just automatically pass. So when we're talking to people, we have to let them know that it wasn't, for whatever reason, things were shifted to bonding questions, or to referendum questions 3 and 4, whatever they will be, and that it's imperative that they pass, because these are urgent, critical needs that we have for our facilities, and there's really just, there's no other option. It's going to be an extreme emergent situation if they do not pass. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you. Mark?
As far as the imminent projects that we have that they must be done this year, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember a time in at least anything recent where imminently needed urgent projects were put into a bonding question. They usually are put in your regular capital because you count on those things. So it's an interesting process that's playing out this year. My question would be, and this is probably just a guessing game here, that if for some reason, because obviously the operating budget, if it's under 15%, I believe, automatically passes. But bonding questions are up or down.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's 10 people, 500 people, 1,000 people. So in the event that the bonding questions do not pass, and we have these imminent projects that normally we wanted in our operating budget for cash, how do we handle the timeline of being prepared to handle these projects that have to be done but aren't funded, if the council's approach is, if they don't pass, we'll come back and find the money anyways. Like, is that going to put off final estimates, timeframes for repairs, trying to figure out, hey, May 10th, we have an operating budget, but there's nothing in there. Do we know what the time frame is for them to go back and be able to either cut out other projects that were approved in a regular capital budget and kind of switch things out, or the time frame for finding that money so that we can do these things, since we know they're going to have to be done anyways, regardless of whether the referendum passes. But now we're in a position where, okay, regardless if it passes, they have to get done, but we don't know until the question passes, but we don't know if it'll pass.
Right.
So is there a time frame that's gonna really set us back in this?
Well, we do, so I believe it's the referendum's on April 26th, correct?
Correct. Right.
Yeah, so if it weren't to pass then, I do know that we go back and changes are made. I don't know what those changes would be, but typically some type of change happens, after, if either the, if it doesn't pass. When it comes to the operating budget, you are correct, and the capital cash, that it's under 15%, it passes. Even if there was a majority no. We've always had a majority yes under the 15%, but I just want to say that it just passes. The bonding questions definitely have to pass by a majority. I think this is new territory for us. If it didn't pass, I heard from the council and Christine, I would want you to also chime in on this. I heard that they would fund definitely the FHS partial roof out of reserve if it didn't pass, because they know that's such an emergency. And I also had shared with them the two other big issues we have would be the Westwoods chiller and the West District heating loop. So those are also, I also said, if you put all of those in bonding, then would we have the ability to, it's over 500,000. Do we have the ability to then go into the reserve for those projects? And my understanding was, if it's an emergency, yes.
That they had committed to going back to find funding for those three specific projects for us.
But timing wise, I couldn't say, Mark. I've never been through this before, so I'm not sure. Certainly, each one of those projects we would like to do this summer, because we want to get ready for, Westwood students coming back and needing air conditioning, and West District students coming back and during the heating system needing heating, and certainly at our high school, that has been a persistent area of, that has been a problem that we're hoping. We had a renovation and then we didn't. So, we were very clear. I think they were very clear about that.
Would it
but
be
the
possible
actual
to kind of
time.
work off of Mark's question
Yeah.
for us to potentially fund those projects if we had to, and then be reimbursed for us to then do the other projects? Or like you said, this is uncharted territory,
Yeah,
so
I-
it's
Yeah, I mean, do we have
Sure.
the ability
We have the ability to do that.
to do that if our vote is for specific projects at specific costs? Do we have the ability to go back then and say, well, this project now has to wait, even though we voted on it, to fund the amount of money we would need for these imminent projects, and make a swap? Is that even possible?
That I would have to really check with Joe. I don't know, Vince, if you know the answer.
I mean, I think if it fell in a bucket, it would be, so if it's an MEP project, like the heat loop, and there were funds in the MEP bucket, I think that one's an easier, that one, I would venture to say that, the heat loop is a very high priority and important, but that's in the bonding question. It's not in the cash up here. So could we say to the board and myself and so on, say that it's more important, we need to do that versus the RTU replacement at the high school, or the deferred maintenance dollars that are there. I think that would be something to think about. The roof one, that is a much harder. That would be a council question, because right now you $55,000 of the $265,000 roof emergency critical repair for Section U and those other pieces is in cash, but $209,000 is in a bonding question. And if that question did not pass, there is no other roof line. So that would be a council question right away. I'll just say one more thing, just to put your mind at ease about one piece about it, about the planning aspect about it. With the roof repair, we are proceeding. We already have the architect. That's what we have. Why I feel very confident about the number. We already have an estimate, and we're moving along down the road, thinking that project is going to occur. And the West District heat loop project. As I've said to the board, myself and Tim Harris remain concerned that we could need to do this project sooner rather than later. So Tim Harris has been very ahead of this. He has spoken to folks about doing that project, and we're frankly prepared to do it when we need to do it. That project, it's very, very critical project.
Right.
So we're hoping that we get through the heating season and that we can do it, in a normal time frame and so on. But the design aspect of it, we're past that.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I know one of the discussions while I was there, obviously with the roof question, is that this is a bonding question. That's was it 15 years, 20 years? We're talking about a 15-year bonding question for a partial FHS roof, where we don't really know the direction that the high school's going in at this point. And 5 years from now, if there's a major renovation at the school and that area changes, or if there's a new high school voted on, we'll still be paying for this roof over the next 20 years after we then have a completely renovated school or new school. I guess that is really my biggest concern, is the perception of putting a FHS roof on a bonding question over a 20-year, 15-year plan. And I know there were some board members that weren't at the meeting for that part of the discussion, but I know the council batted that back and forth for quite a long time in their conversation as well, so.
Liz?
So I was there for that also, and I just wanted to say that Joe Swedke actually said, that exact thing that Mark just said. But the other thing is that the way bonding works is that you don't bond all this money and then save it in your account and do it with the project. So I think that if there's different things that could be done, not all bonds are 15 years, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So
Right, but that was
if
what
you're
they
bonding
put out.
$2 million, you might want to do 15 years, but you bond a little bit at a time as the projects come up.
Right.
So it's not, not all is lost. It doesn't mean that if we do a high school renovation, that we would necessarily still be paying for the bond.
But did
Because
they
we could have a short-term
Did
bond.
they say how long the bond was for at the meeting?
No, because that's something you do afterward. This is
Right.
just allocating the idea of bonding, and I
Just the
believe
authority with a number.
the authority
Yeah,
with a
yeah.
number. It's
Yeah.
Right.
a few years ago, the town bonded, we voted in favor of bonding $3 million for open space. They haven't spent that, they haven't borrowed it yet, they haven't bonded it. But, as properties come up, the authorization's there, and they can just get whatever amount they need to buy a piece of property. So the same thing would be true of this. So if something's a little smaller of a number, I don't know that you go with a 15-year bond. So just to ease your concern.
I agree. I'm just saying, from a public perception view, it's you have to see how long is that bonding going for, because that's gonna, play into people's discussions about the project and going into that question to pull the lever on that.
Just because, I only think that it's okay because Joe actually mentioned it so he's already thinking of that.
Right.
So I think, he knows what he's doing, so it'll be okay.
We'll find out in May, I guess. So.
Okay, any additional questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ken. Okay, next item on the agenda, 7, reported board chair update of committee meeting dates. Communications, Ellen's not here, but that's rescheduled. I can't.
reschedule.
Yeah, we have to reschedule that one, and then I know we're working on that. Negotiations?
There's no meeting
Yeah.
scheduled for March, and I think we're still waiting to hear from CILU as far as their pending schedule. So we were supposed to meet in March, but they're still working things out on their end. So
Okay, yep. Policy
Monday, the 26th at 5:30.
and curriculum?
Tomorrow at the Board of Ed office at 5 is when I think it is. But today's correspondence, I saw it at 4.
It's at 4.
Okay,
Okay,
4.
great. Okay, thank you. Okay, next item, item A, executive session. Can I have a motion to move into executive session?
motion second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Okay, we're in this session. Now we're back in session. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Objections, abstentions? We're adjourned.